afternoon.
How about this?
My name is Gwen Tompkins, and I'm the only person up on this stage who you should not know already. But I am hoping that that our conversation today will help deepen your understanding of the contributions of these three magnificent artists. It's such a pleasure to be here and a real honor to be among them, if only for an hour. But what we're going to do is we're going to start off with some conversation. And then we want to hear some questions from you all. And and so for the most part, I'm just going to dive in if that's all right with you all, okay? Is that all right with you?
It's all right with me.
Okay. And so you all have your microphones, correct?
Yeah.
All right. And feel free to dive in when you feel like it. You don't have to wait for me to say something. You know, this ain't school. Now, elder is a great word. Elderly, not so much, okay? That's because being elderly is harder on the joints than being an elder, right? But each of the people here today, Maria Muldaur, Cyrill Neville, and Tom Rush, have always said what was on their minds. But as elders, they're more interesting than most people, and their words and actions mean more. Babies just cry. Elders say exactly what's the matter in a way that everyone can understand. Please welcome Maria Muldaur, Cyrill Neville. Now, what I wanted to mention first off is that the singer-songwriter Devon Allman was supposed to be with us today, and he passed away unexpectedly, and we're the lesser for it, today. In media, in my job as a journalist and so many journalists, the first thing that we do is, when something like this happens, is that we assess the musical contributions of an artist by the number of albums they've put out, by the awards they've won. But in terms of your experience as musicians, how do you assess the musical contributions of a fellow artist? We'll start with you, Maria.
I always assess it by how much they moved me, how much they inspired me, how much they speak truth through their music, and how much they uplift people. And it doesn't matter how many Grammy nominations or awards or this and that or albums they sold. Some of my favorite artists are virtually under the radar, but it doesn't matter. If it moves you, then it's art worth celebrating and sharing and enjoying.
Would you like to add to that, Tom?
I think I'm going to just say amen. I think it's called the goosebump factor. If you react viscerally to somebody's song, then it's good. And I agree, it doesn't matter. Awards don't matter much, and how many recordings. Some of my favorite artists also, only have maybe 12 tracks they ever recorded in their life.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, it rings true. Do you feel the same, Cyrill Neville? What do the awards, what do the number of albums ultimately mean to you when you look at your fellow musicians and the contributions that they've made?
Well, it's like, for me coming up in New Orleans and everything, what I became as an artist was made up of little snippets of all of these other beautiful people that I was lucky enough to come up under. So, like I agree with what Marie said also. It's like if it comes from the heart, it's gonna go to the heart. If it's from the soul, it's gonna go to the soul. And that's all that matters, really.
It's true. Did any of you all know Mr. Olney?
I did not.
I didn't either. I did not know him, but I listened to some of his songs and loved them. But it's interesting too, because a lot of the music that both you, Mr. Neville, and you, Ms. Muldaur, have recorded has come from sources that who had relatively few chances to record. And so when you think about all of the people on whom this music is built, you know, then we're really just hearing echoes of them over time, aren't we? You know, I mean, you look at Robert Johnson, for instance. I mean, it's not like Robert Johnson made 20 albums and won 3 Grammy Awards, and yet we're probably all sitting here because he existed, right? The great blues man, you know. So let me ask you about. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Neville. Can you talk a little bit about the mentors that you had in life, the people who helped steer you into the path that you ultimately took in life?
Well, started with my parents. Then there were certain teachers at school, and like I said, well, the era that I grew up in, there was a band rehearsing in my living room called the Hawkettes, led by my brother Art Papa Funk Neville, and in that band, well, it was revolving, but there were people like Kid Jordan. I mean, Kid Jordan when I was a kid.
Oh, Kid Jordan, the great sax,
yes,
free jazz player. Yeah.
Scholar, if you will. But I'm just saying that, I said earlier, I am a combination, I'm like a gumbo of all of those people that I came up under, starting with my brothers, and you know, like at any given time, James Booker was at our house on the piano. He came to our house 3 o'clock in the morning to get his version of the theme from The Godfather together from 3:30 that morning until about 7 that morning.
And who opened the door?
I did. You know, how you don't refuse James Booker, you know. But that's basically what I've always said, that I am a little combo of just about, and like you said, there's people who I, you know, got some of these snippets from that nobody else has ever even heard of. You know, there are people on Alan's label.
Alan Toussaint.
Yes, that he produced, and some of the records we know about, and some of them just took a dive. You know, one cat in particular, Eldridge Holmes. I owe him a great deal, and I know a lot of y'all probably never even heard his name before, but
Who was Eldridge Holmes?
Eldridge Holmes was an artist that Alan was developing. You know, and basically this the type of business that this is, you know, at some points talent don't really mean that much. It's about who you know and how lucky you are, or how blessed you are, or whatever. You know, because if you look at TV, late night TV, and see some of the stuff that's coming on there, like talent don't have nothing to do with it.
Oh my God. Well, we're going to get back to that. And so, Tom, Rush, would you like to talk a little bit about the people who helped put you on your path? You come from a far distant region from here, right? We've heard about it.
New Hampshire, it's just next door. I came down here looking for warm weather. Very well. I don't know, they say, wisdom of the elders, they say you're only as old as you think you are.
How old do you think you are?
I think the same applies to wisdom. You're only as wise as you think you are. The people that influenced me would be, Eric Von Schmidt comes to mind right away. He was probably the elder of the whole Cambridge folk scene, but he was the guy who would spend hours and hours in the Library of Congress recordings, finding stuff from prison gangs that nobody else had heard or nobody else had noticed, and bringing them to life. And he also wrote some terrific songs as well. And he was a major influence on me. I arrived in Cambridge deeply in love with Josh White and people like that. And I got to Cambridge and was told, no, they're commercial. What you want is ethnic. You want ethnic. And so I said, oh, okay. And then became enamored of the old blues guys. And I learned a lot from Sleepy John Estes, and Booker White, and on and on and on, all those folks. But sitting at the Club 47 night after night after night, instead of studying, which I should have been doing, I got to hear legend after legend after legend, and I soaked it all up.
Well, Maria Moldauer, who put their hands on you and helped put you on the path that you ultimately took?
It wasn't me.
And is there a police report?
Well, I was attracted to music from a very early age. I grew up a little Sicilian-American girl living in New York City, and my mother was a school teacher, and she had very highfalutin ideas. She only wanted me to listen to classical music, but she had a younger sister, my Aunt Katie, who liked what she called cowboy music, which was the early country and western music of the day. So she sabotaged all my mother's efforts and would play all this great stuff for me. So at age 5, I was listening to Hank Williams, Hank Snow, Hank Thompson, Kitty Wells. And the first song I remember, she also played very fractured sort of Floyd Kramer-esque honky-tonk piano. And I remember the very first song I learned to sing was It Wasn't God Who Made Honky-Tonk Angels. And I didn't know what I was singing about, but I sang it with all my heart. And then I just have always loved music, and I listened to the early R&B at the very edge of the dial. All the cool stations are always like 2-watt stations at the very edge of the dial, and I listened as that early R&B morphed into rock and roll. I had a doo-wop group, girls doo-wop group in high school, and cut class so that we could practice our harmony in the bathroom, which had great acoustics, and we actually had would lie to our parents, tell them we were going to do a book report in the library, and we would get all dressed up in these sharp little outfits. The name of the band was the Cashmeres. We thought that sounded pretty classy, and we'd go to the area known as Tin Pan Alley, and we go to the Brill Building. I can't believe we have the chutzpah to do this when I think of it now. And we would just look at the directory in the lobby and see all the publishing companies and record companies, and just start at the top and go up the elevator and burst into the office and say, "Hi, we're the Cashmeres," you know. And after a while, somebody actually who managed a few groups like that, actually got us a record deal, and on, I think it was on Gone Records. It was the same label that the Shirelles were on. But once my mother heard about what was going on, and it wasn't all about the book reports, she, we were underage, so I confessed to her that she needed to go up and sign the contract, and she was having no part of that, and so that cut my blossoming rock and roll career to an abrupt halt, and I was very disappointed. But right around that same time, because I grew up in Greenwich Village, I noticed that there was something emerging, which my dear friend John Sebastian always refers to as the folk scare of the 60s. And it was a lot of people in the urban north discovering and exploring all kinds of American roots music. And so every Sunday in Washington Square Park, there'd be like little mini hootenannies going on. There was a big fountain in the middle, and there'd be like a bluegrass group here and an old-timey fiddle group there, and somebody playing the blues over there. And then a lot of protest, people that were part of the protest music and of folk music. So I forgot all about rock and roll, which was getting pretty watered down by about that time anyway. And so after I started hanging out on that scene, I started learning to play old-time Appalachian fiddle. I first heard the blues. I first heard Bessie Smith singing Empty Bed Blues, and that was a epiphanal moment for me. I said, I want to do that when I grow up. So people were forming bands left and right, and I had some friends who formed a jug band. And I had been away in North Carolina visiting Doc Watson and his family because his father-in-law was teaching me to play fiddle. And I come back one Sunday, and John Sebastian and David Grisman come running up to me and say, guess what? We're forming a jug band and we want you to be in it. And so apparently they had discovered some jug band music records and started playing around. And there was this wonderful, this is in answer to your question about who put their hand on me. So there was a wonderful woman, one of the original classic blues queens, Victoria Spivey, who was hanging out on the scene. And as far as I know, she was she had been a contemporary of Bessie Smith's, and Sippy Wallace had recorded a lot in the 20s and early 30s. But she was the first artist I know of anyway that was savvy enough to start her own record label. And so in fact, she was the first person to ever record Bob Dylan, just as a little side note, way before Columbia. And well, here's what happened. She had seen these guys fooling around with some jug band music, and I'm sure it brought back, she was fond of that music because it was from her day, and she offered them a record deal. So, but she said, now these were all kind of gangly teenagers, and so she said apparently to them, now you boys sound real good, but you need to get some sex appeal up there. And she said, why don't you get that little gal I saw down in the park with the pigtails playing the fiddle? You get her in your band, and then you'll really have something. And so they did, and so they said, so she told us, we need some sex appeal in the band, so will you join the band? So it was way before women's liberation, so I didn't feel insulted to be asked for my sex appeal. So I said, sure, sounds like fun. I did. So I joined the band, and then this is the part it's so moving to me to this day. She took me under her wing, brought me to her apartment. I had just a very young, quavery, young kind of ingenue kind of voice at the time. I wanted to sound like Bessie Smith, but I was decades away from that. But she brought me to her apartment and played me records that she thought would suit my young voice, including her own, and Memphis Minnie. She turned me on to Memphis Minnie, which was a lifelong someone who inspired me from that day to this. And she also would give me pointers. She said, now listen, when you get up there, it ain't enough to sound good. You got to look good too. You got to get up there, strut your stuff, and make all eyes be on you. And then she looked at me real meaningfully and she said, that's what they call stage presence. And so I feel like she, touched me, when I think back on it now, what a blessing that was.
That is a blessing. Let me ask you this, in 50 years of touring, Johnny Cash, after 50 years of touring, he said, the only thing that really changed on the road is that you can now buy extra crispy chicken. So Tom Rush, Cyrill Neville, tell us a little bit about your road experiences. And I don't know if you've been on the road 50 years, but have you noticed differences that have been meaningful? Have you noticed differences that have helped you, differences that have not helped you?
I think it's 58 years at this point. I'm trying to think. I've learned some tricks. When you have a band or somebody else working with you that's new, and you get in the car, what I do is I right away start up a one-way street the wrong way, or swerve abruptly for no apparent reason and say, "Hey, sorry." And after about 5 or 6 of those, the other guy says, I'll drive, it's okay. It served me well. But that's not a difference in the road, that's a trick that I learned. I don't know, the road seems to get harder and harder, actually. I have learned a few tricks, but basically the flying has gotten harder because of Homeland Security and the way they want to take everything apart. I've got this guitar with a reclining nude entwined with a serpent engraved on the neck. And Homeland Security just loves the naked lady guitar. It's always coming back with broken strings and things.
Oh, no.
But I think it's just, I'm not as energetic perhaps as I was when I was 23. But I just did a tour out in the Rockies with 7 shows in 8 days, 1,300 miles driving, and live to tell about it.
Wow. Wow.
So, and the extra crispy chicken is special.
It does help. It does help. And Mr. Neville, you know, in your years of touring, you know, what have you noticed changing to make touring better for you or to actually hamper touring for you? We need your microphone.
This new phenomenon that they call all in.
All in.
Yes, when you call for a venue and they tell you that it's all in X amount of dollars, all in, meaning you have to get yourself to the gig and you got to spend some of whatever money they're offering you for your hotels and all of this kind of stuff.
The contracts have changed. They've gotten sneakier.
Just the whole landscape of the industry changed. You know, nothing is like it used to be. You know, back in the day, it used to be fun touring. But I mean, you know, like I said, society has changed. You know, to the point where just recently you on the road and you notice that certain things that used to go on way back in the 60s are kind of returning.
Like what?
Like certain places that you are not welcome. And you're let know that you're not welcome.
Because of race or because
Yes.
of any other?
And that's the other thing about it, that's the big gorilla sitting in the room that nobody ever wants to talk about.
Yes. Yes.
You know, and it makes a big difference in a lot of people's lives that it is so different.
Can you give an example? You don't have to say the name of the you know, use your own judgment in terms of specifics.
Well, basically, it's permeating the whole industry. You know, I'll give you one example somebody gave me was that the industry is full of snakes and vermin and sharks and vultures and vampires, and then there's the bad side. So, I mean, you know, you can kind of figure out what I mean from that.
Wow. Wow. And so, Ms. Muldaur, briefly, can you you know, comment on that in terms of what you've noticed briefly, you know, changing for you on the road?
Well, I think that I've always loved touring. I'm a road dog at heart, and I travel in a motorhome. It's smaller and more affordable and less polluting than a bus. And it's just like a big rolling living room. We stay in hotels at night. So I kind of bring as many of the comforts at home as I can with me and the band. But I would say that since 9/11, all that Homeland Security stuff, I mean, flying is now such a huge, giant pain in the ass. It is just, you know, they're practically strip searching you at the, you know, going through and taking your shoes off. One thing about getting to a certain age, I can now keep my shoes on. But I'll take any perk I can. And so that to me, and you know, the seats getting narrower and narrower and shorter. So they're just trying to cram everybody in like sardines. And to me that is, it's an insult, but it's just part of the greed of this culture in these times.
Can I add to that?
Of course.
It's very expensive to fly.
Thank
So you have, nowadays, if you got a band that have 5 or 6 members in it, it's really hard to, you know, to do business. You know, traveling is really, everything has changed, like I said, and everything is a lot more expensive than it was, and everything has, you know, the cost of living has gone up, but the minimum wage has been the same thing for I don't know how long.
That's true. Tom?
In terms of the airline seats getting smaller and smaller, I've also noticed that my belt keeps shrinking.
Is it?
Absolutely. I'm keeping my eye on it, but it shrinks. Another thing I think that's shifted in the past few years is that in the good old days, we just showed up and did a show, and the venue promoted the show, and the record label promoted the show. Now, the artist is expected to, you know, to do their own promotion. I now have a publicist and a social media person to take care of all the interweb stuff that I don't know what to do with. And I'm expected to, you know, to help sell the tickets. And if the show doesn't sell out, it's my fault.
Oh, and so what has improved, if anything?
Silence.
I'd like to think my artistry has improved.
I think some of the new acts that are coming in who are real musicians and, you know, really got whatever it is refreshing. But they're gonna have a tough time. Well, as I used to hear say, that's gonna be a hard road to hoe.
Right.
You know, getting to the point that you are self-sufficient as an artist and everything, when you gotta go through all of these changes, and then at the end of it, if it don't turn out the way the other folks want it, it's your fault. You know, so it's kind of like you fighting a losing battle, really.
Right, right. And so, but the thing is, you know, do you find yourself becoming excited? I mean, I'm so happy you mentioned new up-and-coming artists, you know, who are exciting. Do you find yourself becoming excited about young people who are, you know, who you're encountering either on the road or hearing or seeing on TV?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you name any of them?
The guy that's working with me, Matt Nicole, a monster talent, but it is a whole different ballgame getting established now. In the good old days, if you had a record deal, if you didn't have a record deal, you didn't exist.
Right.
And if you had a record deal, then the record company would take care of a lot. And now there's, you know, the record companies pretty much have shrunk. You know, a #1 hit now sells about 10% of what it did 20 years ago.
Right.
And it's all on the internet, and it's downloads. The younger crowd doesn't even buy, you know, doesn't even buy downloads, they stream everything. And I get more and more people at the vending table saying, well, I don't have a CD player, so what do I sell them?
And so, Maria Maldar, who's exciting you right now?
I'm so glad you asked that. Because I just did a showcase last night with a band I fell in love with a couple of years ago, right from here in New Orleans, named Tuba Skinny. And I heard them playing in a store, and I thought, oh, what is that old jazz station? And the person told me, oh no, this is a group, and I was shocked to find they were a bunch of young folks. And they live here in New Orleans, and they mostly, until recently, just played on the street. But I spent my whole life, because I started out, you know, playing jug band music, and so my whole, everything about me musically is informed by the music of the 20s and 30s and early 40s. And this band, there's a lot of bands playing traditional jazz, or what some people might call Dixieland jazz, but these kids aren't just playing it, they're channeling it. And I put them on, I bought all their CDs immediately. When I put them on at home, it immediately gives me energy, it makes me feel happy. And so I met them last year when I was doing Jazz Fest, and they invited me to sit in. I was following them around like a you know, young groupie. And we did a show last night, and it was just like a marriage made in heaven, because they play with such loving reverence for the old stuff, and they do it with a group. A lot of people can play a lot of notes and even copy, you know, solos from so-and-so from back in the past. But what these kids have is a groove that's like channeling a groove, a much more relaxed groove from a much more relaxed time, before there was all this mechanized, you know, digitalized, industrialized society, when life itself breathed with a more, you know, with a more languid, relaxed rhythm. And that's what these kids are doing, they're channeling that, and so I'm very excited about them. And so Tuba Skinny, people, check them out, they're all over the website.
And so, Mr. Neville, you know, I was, earlier this year, I ran across a quote that I just am living by right now, and it reminds me of you and the work that you've done with your family. And that's from Gustav Mahler, the classical, you know. And he said, tradition is not the worship of ashes, but the celebration of fire. And when I think of your work, I think of the celebration of fire. You know?
Well, you know, I'm that fire you can't put out that Press talked about in the beginning of one of his songs. You know, and basically my love for the root of what this all is, you know, keeps me, you know, up and active, because I'm still at a point where I'm transitioning. You know, I can't remain the same, and so to not innovate, you wind up stagnating.
Well, who turns you on now? You know, what young or upcoming act? God knows you got a million people in your own family who are coming up. But...
It's like this in this city. Mm-hmm. It's like you see, there's families that's constantly producing other elements of their family's musical heritage and dispensing it to the public. And you have the same thing. I'll put it like this: the Andrews family. The Andrews family got a member of the Andrews family in every brass band in this city.
That's right. That's right. And the Andrews family comes from, of course, Mr. Upupadoo himself.
Jesse Hill.
Jesse Hill. Then you've got, James Andrews. You've got Glenn David Andrews. You've got Trombone Shorty.
You know we to name them all.
Yeah, you kidding?
We sit there for 2 days. But I'm just saying that, and there's, younger people in each one of those families that's coming along and carrying on the tradition, and that's what I'm like. And what I'm seeing is a group in town called Sierra Green and the Soul Machine. Mm. Now, I had a band way back in the 60s and 70s called the Soul Machine.
Exactly.
Me and my brother Aaron.
Mm-hmm.
But I look at them and I see very young people on there with old souls. That's, like she said, is not just up there pitter-pattering around, they're actually up there paying homage to what they're doing,
mm-hmm.
And there's a group called Water Seed.
Yeah.
You ain't never seen nothing like that before. Well, yes you have, because it's a combination of them and everything you've seen in their history. I mean, they put it out there, and they're from New Orleans.
Mm.
But it's like people outside of New Orleans, when music don't sound like Professor Longhair, or if it don't sound like it's supposed to be played at Mardi Gras, it's not New Orleans music. But, that's just asinine.
Yeah.
Because
we're no different.
Because I agree with Ernie Cato, who said years ago that he said he wasn't very sure, he was almost positive that all music came from New Orleans. So, and then in the tradition of passing things down, my family, there's a group called Omari Neville and the Fuel around. If you haven't seen them yet, they're playing at the Maple Leaf every Wednesday this month. But that group is a combination of my son and Darryl Johnson and Eric Struthers, who both were 20 years with the Nevill Brothers.
Right.
And then Cranston Clemens' son, Austin Clemens, is playing keyboards and bass.
Wow.
My son is on drums, but what they are doing basically is when you see that band, when you feel that band, you feel it in the Nevill Brothers, the Wild Chapel Tuners, the Meters, and anything else you can name funk. And that's basically what I've been going around seeing, is that the bands, like you see, the ones that are channeling what the true meaning of the music is the ones that I really pay attention to. And I'm fortunate that that's the ones that's going to have the hardest time becoming what they should become because of all of this other,
right.
the changes in the industry.
Well, my question to you all is how do you get out of the niche, in the sense that you all have been performing for a long enough time that you have name recognition pretty much wherever you go. Nowadays, it seems as if because record companies are not able to offer what they used to offer, as you mentioned, Tom Rush, that artists are having to be content with only having a regional audience or only having an audience within a particular town even. How do you get out of that? What's your best guess?
Go ahead.
It's a very, very tough question. Going back
That's
to
why I'm here.
Going back to Matt Nicola, the guy he's been my accompanist for the past 5 years, but he also has a band and he does his own shows. I would expect over the past 5 years he would now be playing stadiums, and I would be trying to get on as the opening act. But no, it's really difficult to figure out how to work your way up. I don't have an answer.
Yeah.
Well, as far as I'm not very, internet savvy at all. I'm so old school, I still have a flip phone. But it seems to me, watching Tuba Skinny is that, and a lot of bands like that, I mean, there's the thing where the whole social media thing of going viral. I'm sure they have, I don't know, millions of hits, and now they have fans all over the world. It's not translating into them playing stadiums yet, but that seems to be, to me, the way that the younger groups are approaching this no help from the industry factor that is like, okay, if you want something done right, do it yourself. And a lot of them are rising to recognition through that medium.
Mr. Neville?
You know, the industry right now, you have, and this didn't just happen recently, Clear Channel Radio. Clear Channel took over everything, not just the radio, they took over TV, they took over venues, they bought management companies, booking agencies. So when you're dealing with these conglomerates that you're dealing with now, it's like an assembly line, and there's people out with hit records that sound real good on those records. And then when they get in person, without all of the studio trickeration, and you finally see what the real deal is. And this is the stuff that real artists have to swim through to be able to get noticed. Because like I said, it ain't about talent. To a certain extent it is. But the majority of the people nowadays that you see that are getting those late night TV things with, which I was glad to see Lizzo got to do that, which in my estimation, I think Tank and the Bangers should have been on that, on one of them too.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all know.
Just nominated, right?
So that's what I'm saying. That's a great group right there, but you can really be as great as you want as a musician and everything, if that business part of it ain't taken care of right, and that's what it is. A lot of people, musicians, myself included, didn't take the time to really pay attention to that side of it. And then when you do, and you start realizing what it is, then you have to do what I was telling you I'm doing now, and reinvent yourself.
Right. Well, let me ask you this. I want to talk to you all about the body, right? Now, but the thing about it is that, the body does what it does, no matter how many push-ups you do or how many calories you sacrifice, the body does what it does. And in fact, Maria Moldauer, you were just in California with Linda Ronstadt, who has been diminished by Parkinson's disease, and so many things that you can't control. But to talk about a little bit about how that makes your art, how that affects your art, the degradation of the body. Yes, we can all dwell on the sad parts, but but in life there's always a balance. So what's the balancing factor, the positive?
Well, I just fight that factor all the way. I swim a mile a day when I'm home, and even on the road, even if I have to use a dinky little hotel pool. I used to say, oh, that's not even worth getting wet. But now, the older I get, just getting in the body and getting in the water and moving my body is so important. And I think that, of course, I've always thought trying to be healthy is of utmost importance, because this is the vehicle through which you channel the spirit that you're trying to share with people through your music. But
what's more potent on stage for you when you're on stage?
Well, I mean, just trying to keep your instrument as fit as you possibly can, and then lately especially just trying to balance that with radical acceptance and going, I'm just never gonna be the same hot little babe I used to be, but maybe I can just be a healthy, mature lady, and just bring a lot of that, and just try to stay as fit as I can to do this as long as I can, because I just love what I do, and I want to do it, as long as I can.
When Matisse lost his eyesight, he began making cutouts that ultimately created, I think it was Matisse, that ultimately created, a new form of art. Something that he was actually remembered for, And what have the changes in your own body, the changes in your own biology done to affect, the music that you make?
Well, I agree with Maria in terms of the end goal here. I am taking a different approach, and I avoid exercise at every opportunity. Because I have observed that most of my friends, most of the people at our age, are having their knees replaced and their hips replaced. This is all original equipment. Thank you very much. And I found in terms of singing, I found that, the high notes are they've gotten higher than they used to be, but the low notes are so much better. And I think, just in terms of experience, I think what you said earlier about, it's heart to heart, soul to soul, that's finally sunk in, and I've gotten more connected, I think, with the people listening.
Mr. Neville, your body.
Well, my brother Aaron is, I'm 71, I'm the youngest Nevill brother, right? He took a picture of his last birthday, and I think he was 77, and he was in the gym. And he was buffer than everybody in the gym. So it's a thing about taking care of you at the pace you need to take care of you and leave everything else, because basically age is gonna catch up with you if you're lucky. If you're here long enough,
yes.
So if you just got to learn how to roll with the punches and the pinches and all of this kind of stuff, and still be able to enjoy life and still be able to do what you do. But basically music comes from the spirit. And basically, as long as you have that intact, your spirit is intact, because basically we are all spiritual beings having a human experience.
That's true. But I find, to be honest with you, that when you have fewer tools, you use the tools that you have more wisely, more cleverly, and sometimes breadth of, of talent, as you say, Tom Rush, hitting the high notes and hitting any note that you want, can sometimes be an impediment to better artistry, because it takes the artist to use. Look at Billie Holiday; she had a very small range, but damn, what did she do with that range, And all. So, so how do you deal with that? What can you do better now on stage than when you started out?
Well, I always wanted to have, I aspired to sound like all the blues women that I admired so much, but I just wasn't born with that kind of voice. But one of the blessings of getting older is, even though everything else went south, so did my voice. And so now still have all my high range, but I have over an octave lower, and so I can use that. You just use what God has given you at the moment to express the most you can.
Yeah, my brother Aaron told me basically, if you got a strain for a note, you don't need to sing it.
You get a string for a note. You don't need to sing it.
Amen.
Oh, boy.
I'm gonna remember that one.
I think notes are overrated. I'm just saying,
Vibes are much more important, right?
absolutely. But it's and I've evolved into a situation where I'm half narrating, half singing a lot of the time. I've recorded a couple of albums in Nashville, and Fergie, the engineer, took me aside at one point and he said, "Tom, auto-tune don't work on your voice." And he meant it as a compliment, and he played me some Johnny Cash. He did a lot of engineering for Cash. He played me some Johnny Cash that he'd run through an auto-tune, just for the fun of it, and it was grotesque.
Yeah.
So, notes are overrated.
And I'm going to ask one last question, and then we're going to open it up to you all. But yesterday, I had the privilege of talking with Bill Malone, who is the, who wrote the book on country music. He's an academic. He figured very prominently in the Ken Burns series on country music that ran recently. But when he started out in the late 50s, early 60s, at school, concentrating on country music, he didn't have a lot of love from the academy, from academics, who were saying maybe you should be studying something more important than country music. And now, after all these years teaching, he's retired and all, but he says he's 85 now, and he says, "I feel vindicated today. I feel vindicated after all of these years where people thought my idea was not worth it in the beginning, and now I've lived long enough to see my idea valued in society, that country music matters." What ideas can you think of that you had, as a young person, where you went on your own, that you feel today you have had the blessing to live long enough to actually see come to fruition and be valued by others? Yes, sir.
Oh, okay, well, just recently, I was contacted by the Library of Congress and asked to do a newer version, updated version of the song, "Thank You, Sister Rosa Parks."
Oh, boy.
And, yeah, so, and I don't know how many years ago that was, we did it, but I think that particular song, and it's a few of the songs that the brothers did that I could see really changed my life and changed, I think, the lives of a lot of other people who heard it and felt it from where it was coming from, because I basically was looking at my sons, my nephews, not being able to remember their schoolwork, but they could remember these big, long rap songs, So I said, well, maybe if I put a little knowledge to a beat, maybe they'll pick up on that too, and that's why I wrote the song. And so now that's came 360 degrees, and they want me to do an upgraded version, which I changed the line about all she wanted was a well-deserved rest, and basically to what the real deal was, but using her words. Which basically she didn't get up because she was tired of being misused. Tired of being mistreated, that's why she refused to be reseated. So that's basically one of the blessings that have come from the work that me and my brothers did together.
Exactly. Mr. Rush.
I don't know if this is a direct response, but I think music has always been a moving force in society, and I think that's maybe becoming more true. Centuries ago in England, I cannot come up with a name, but some important guy. I could make up a name because you don't know it either. But somebody way back when said, "I care not who writes the laws if I can write the songs." And I think that's wise.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And Miss Mulder?
Well, coming up as I did in the early days of the folk revival, it was a very potent movement. There was sort of epicenters of it in New York City, Boston, and out in Berkeley were the three main. And but it was sort of a underground fringe movement. We were discovering music that had originally emerged several decades earlier, whether it was blues, bluegrass, or whatever. And then, of course, that kind of got more commercialized when Bob Dylan and sort of folk music started to, you know, be popular on the radio. But now, all these decades later, there's way more, without any help from the above ground media. You're not going to read about it in People magazine or see about it on Entertainment Tonight. But there are more blues clubs, blues bands, blues festivals, blues record companies, and that goes for old-timey bluegrass, country music, let alone, you know, world music, Cajun music, Zydeco music. It's proliferated as a real grassroots movement because it's music of the people, by the people, and for the people. And like, you know, to paraphrase whoever it was that said that, it ain't going nowhere. And it's just spreading, and people are so sick, and it's like being force-fed crappy junk food all the time and then being offered a delicious, nutritious, home-cooked meal. You know, younger generations hear this. I think there was a big surge of it after the movie Oh Brother, Where Art Thou came out. I think that was the first time a lot of younger generation people heard any of that pure, wonderful Appalachian music and so forth. And so people are naturally attracted to it. So all this music, everything that comes under the umbrella of what we're here for at the Folk Alliance is growing and growing and growing way more than when this music first emerged. So that's got to be a very encouraging thing.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Thank you. And so, does anyone have a question you'd like to ask? Oh, Sharice Harrison Nelson.
It's not a question, it's a comment. I am, you know, making me get up. It's a comment. I am an educator, and I still teach elementary school. And we started having Jazz Awareness Month activities at my school, and my father, the late Big Chief Donald Harrison Sr., who was a jazz enthusiast, helped me. So we had, and my brother was the first person to come and do things because he's my little brother, Donald Harrison Jr. But I went to school with Carl LeBlanc. Carl LeBlanc came to the school and he introduced the children to Thank You, Miss Rosa. And they sang it every year. And that's the way we taught them about Rosa Parks. And one of the other people to come, and I could just go down the list of people who came to the school to perform for the children, Charmaine Nevill, and Lulu and Danny Barker.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
They came and they did second lines around the children, and Mrs. Barker taught the children the song about Shimmy Like My Sister Kate. So you had little 8-year-old girls doing this. So what I want to just say is really thank you. You're always on the battlefront. You're a wonderful musician, a wonderful artist, but you're a cultural warrior.
Coming from you, that's a great compliment.
And we have to fight this fight. And I'm very glad to be at this conference where we're talking about music that emanates from African American experiences. And I invite all of you to go back to your chapters wherever they are and have some people that look like me in your chapters. Don't just talk the talk, walk the walk. There's space for the optics to improve.
Yes, ma'am. Talk loud.
I will.
Stand up.
Stand up.
Okay, I'm up. So,
I could give you my opinion, but I know it would never happen because what that would take is for greedy ass people to stop being so greedy. Exactly, that's why I'm thanking you for saying what you just said, because, you know, basically I said earlier that big 900-pound gorilla called race is always pushed to the side, but it has had a great negative impact on a lot of people's lives and career. And I don't care how famous you get or how rich you get, if you look like this, there's a name for you and it ain't rich. So I'm just saying it don't matter about that, and what matters most is what I said earlier about things coming from the heart and from the soul to go to the heart and to the soul. And that's basically, we can make the world go around a little better.
And so Mr. Rush and Ms. Meldar, you know, have you thought about the industry and if there's a way forward that would be more inclusive or better?
All I can say is, having just said this is music of the people and by the people and for the people, we've all, although we're all grousing about things getting more difficult, this is, after all, it's folk music. It's not commercial music. I mean, or you call it roots music. And therefore, there's always a way, if maybe you are just you know, before there were recordings, there were talented people in every town who you know, musical guys who would play for the dances on Saturday nights or for church on Sunday, and the social events of any community had musicians who would be there to play them, you know, be the soundtrack to that. And I mean, there's people, ladies in my church who sing better than anybody that'll ever be on, you know, have a #1 hit. And yet, you know, sometimes you have to be, maybe you don't want to, this kind of music isn't most of it time stadium music. It's music to be heard in a more intimate setting. And I'm happy to do that. I prefer those kind of gigs, the kind of music I play. To me, blues are a very intimate expression. So I'm happier doing them in a little club. So maybe it's not so much to get bigger and bigger and more famous and more rich, but just to keep spreading the truth of this music around in whatever personal little circles, you know, and then whatever's meant to emerge will emerge and find a way to be heard. That's my thought.
It's puzzled me. I think this is a perfect environment, a perfect growing field for protest music, and I keep wondering where's the next Tom Paxton? Mr. Paxton is still very prolific, but where's the next Phil Ochs? Where's the next? You know, I would like to see the younger crowd start writing in that vein.
Right. Well, I can't tell you how much of a thrill this has been talking to each of you today. You all have been magnificent, and I just can't thank you enough for all of the years that you have spent, you know, I mean, bringing us the message, bringing us the word, and I hope that we meet again very, very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Very much.